September 16, 1943. Lae, New Guinea. General Douglas MacArthur stood in his headquarters in Port Moresby, staring at a map of Lae, a heavily fortified Japanese stronghold that controlled the entire Huon Peninsula. He'd been planning this operation for months. A massive amphibious assault. American troops landing on beaches, naval bombardment, air support. The full weight of Allied military power overwhelming Japanese defenses. Then, Major General George Wooten walked into the room and said 7 words that made MacArthur's face turn red. "We don't need your help, General." MacArthur looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're proposing to take Lae with 1 Australian division against 8,000 entrenched Japanese defenders, without American ground forces, without naval gunfire support? You'll be massacred." Wooten didn't blink. "We've been fighting Japanese forces for 2 years while your troops were still training. We know how they think, how they fight, how they break. Give us the air support and transport we need, then stay out of our way." The room went silent. Nobody spoke to MacArthur like that. American staff officers waited for Wooten to be relieved of command on the spot. Instead, MacArthur did something surprising. He agreed, not because he believed Wooten could succeed, but because if the Australians failed, it would prove MacArthur's grand operational plans were necessary. And if they somehow succeeded, MacArthur could take credit anyway. "You have 1 week," MacArthur said. "If you haven't taken Lae by September 23rd, American forces will be committed, and you'll follow my operational plan. Understood?" Wooten nodded and left. Outside the headquarters, his aide asked if he'd really just told MacArthur to stay out of Australian operations. "I did," Wooten said, "and now we have 6 days to prove we meant it." What happened next would become one of the most impressive small unit operations of the Pacific War, and it would permanently change the command relationship between Australian and American forces in the Southwest Pacific. Lae wasn't just another Japanese base. It was the logistics hub for all Japanese operations in New Guinea, defended by the 51st Division, 8,000 battle-hardened troops who'd fought in China and the Philippines. The town itself sat on a peninsula, with ocean on 3 sides and mountains on the 4th. Every approach was covered by bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery positions that had been fortified for over a year. American intelligence estimated it would take 3 divisions and sustained naval bombardment to capture Lae. Predicted casualties, 30 to 40% of attacking forces. Time required, 3 to 4 weeks of continuous fighting. Wooten had different ideas. He commanded the Australian 9th Division, veterans of the North Africa campaign, where they had held Tobruk against Rommel and fought at El Alamein. These weren't green troops learning jungle warfare. These were soldiers who'd already beaten Germans and Italians in conditions everyone said were impossible. Wooten's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of the direct amphibious assault MacArthur wanted, the 9th Division would land east of Lae at undefended beaches, then advance overland through terrain the Japanese considered impassable. Meanwhile, the 7th Division would advance from the west through the Markham Valley, squeezing Japanese forces between 2 converging Australian forces. No American ground troops, no massive naval bombardment that would alert Japanese defenses days in advance. Just 2 Australian divisions moving fast through jungle, hitting Japanese positions from unexpected angles and giving the defenders no time to organize coordinated resistance. MacArthur's staff called it reckless. Wooten called it the only way to win without spending months and thousands of lives in frontal assaults. September 4th, 1943, the 9th Division landed at beaches 30 kilometers east of Lae. 0 Japanese resistance. The landing was so smooth, so unopposed, that American observers thought it was a feint before the real invasion. It wasn't a feint. Wooten had gambled that Japanese intelligence would assume Lae would be attacked directly, so they'd concentrate defenses around the obvious approach. Landing east meant Australian forces had to march through swamps and jungle, but it also meant avoiding prepared killing zones. For 3 days, the 9th Division pushed through terrain American planners had labeled impassable. Thick jungle, swamps, rivers with no bridges, steep ridges. The kind of ground where you measure progress in hundreds of meters per day. The Australians covered 30 kilometers in 4 days, not because they had better equipment, They had the same basic infantry weapons everyone else carried.